I actually wrote the book kind of as a way to process a relationship that had ended. And it started out as a very literal writing of the things that happened in this relationship. And then as I realized that, like, you can't write out 6 years worth of events and make them interesting in like in a format like that, I started kind of like condensing my emotions into themes that then became, like more representative. And then it just kind of spiraled from there. The story is really intricate and sprawling. And I look back at it and I'm like, I don't know how how this came out of my brain. But that's kind of the beauty of pantsing is that it's like, you're unveiling the angel in the marble, or who, I don't remember who said that, but I really do feel that way. Like you're carving a story out of nothing, but like it's always existed.
Hello, and welcome to So I Wrote a Book, Now What? Where writers chat about writing. My guest today is H.M. Geiser. She is a psychological thriller author who is currently on submission with, I don't know if she wants me to share the title, so I'm not going to, but a really, truly amazing psychological thriller. I'm about 40% into it right now, and I can't wait to see what happens. So we talk about everything, a lot about the querying process and getting an agent and what that looks like, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. Hi, Hannah. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So what made you decide to write a book?
It's actually kind of a funny story. I think I have like a pretty typical kind of gifted kid story about, how like I really liked writing and reading when I was younger, and then I kind of fell out of the habit when I was in school. I do marketing for a living, so I write emails every day, and I just didn't feel like writing when I got home. But one of my coworkers started writing a book, and I thought that was the coolest thing ever. But I, in no way, shape, or form, thought that I had the ability to write one myself. I was like, that's something other people do. But then I was catching up with a friend of mine who I hadn't seen in a long time, and they were asking me what I was up to, and I didn't have anything interesting to say. I was like, oh, I watch Netflix. I don't really do anything interesting. So I said that I was writing a book, like just because I thought it sounded cool. I had no intention to actually write it. And then their reaction, they were just like, like they were not impressed with it even a little bit. And so at that moment, I was like, I'm going to show you. Now I'm actually going to write one, and you're going to eat that little eh. So I started writing out of spite, actually.
That's wonderful. What better reason?
Yeah, so I don't think they're going to get a dedication in the book, but they're definitely going to get something in the acknowledgments, like, you started this.
Thanks for being so unexcited about my endeavor that I wasn't actually doing yet.
Yeah. I think I would have eventually found my way to writing. It just kind of sped up the wheels that were already kind of in motion, if that makes sense.
It does. It makes a lot of sense. And I also hate it. Like, when I tell people that I write, I don't want a big reaction, but like, it's a book. It's a whole book.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's hard.
But like, then again, I feel like a lot of people don't even read books anymore because it's too hard. It's like,
oh, don't say
I wrote
that.
that. Be excited about it.
So when you sat down to write it, did you outline it or did you just go for it?
I am the most chaotic form of pantser. When I sit down to write, I'm doing it on literally nothing but vibes. Like when I start a story, I have the vaguest idea, and then I just start writing. Like I know it's going to be a thriller. That seems to be just like what my brain is wired for. But other than that, I don't really know what's going to happen.
You don't know the ending?
I don't know the ending. The only thing that I go in, like the only thing, like obviously I'm thinking about different ideas as time goes on. But the things that I'm thinking about are more midpoints than endings, just because I feel like that's where things get really juicy in a story. It's where, it's like that midpoint reversal. Like I live for that moment. So I'm thinking of ideas. I'm like, ooh, what's something really juicy that could happen to a character at the 50% mark? And then once I
Mhm.
figure out something that like intrigues me, then I just start writing and start like just trying to feel my way to that midpoint. And then once I reach it, then it's all just kind of like completely flying by the seat of my pants.
To the end.
Yeah, I've tried plotting, but I just feel like I have my best ideas while I'm actually physically writing.
Mhm.
And because I'm a pantser, there are a lot of times where I'll write a lot of words, like up to 20,000 words, and decide like maybe a story isn't worth pursuing or that it's not working. And then I'll just scrap it and start over and try again and like keep the pieces from the existing, the piece that I've already wrote that I still like. Um, and I feel like that takes about the same amount of time as plotting, because by the time I've finally got that 20,000 word foundation that feels good and I feel like I can keep writing with, I've been in the character's head for so long that I feel like I'm like really in the story. And it just makes it
Mhm.
easier to like make their choices seem more organic going forward. Whereas where I'm trying to look at it from too much of a bird's eye view, it just doesn't feel like the pacing is as natural, at least for me.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I am also a pantser and I have tried outlining and I've outlined a book and I wrote it, but I didn't stick to the outline when I wrote it.
Yeah, when I do outline, that's been my experience too. I make it through like one or two chapters and then I'm like, actually, the rest of this is not going to work.
Yeah, and I spent so long on it. Like I thought about those points.
Yeah. I believe in pantsing. I hear a lot of people say that like they're a reformed pantser, like that's not how they started writing, but through their evolution and becoming a better writer, they became a plotter. And I kind of see it as like being an introvert or an extrovert. You're either one or the other. And you can like work against your nature and, you can plot because you think that that's the right thing to do, or you can do it because that's just how your brain is wired. And for me
Mhm.
personally, I just feel like, much like being an introvert, I'm just a pantser. Like I was just not born to plot. I wish that I could. I feel like my life would be a lot easier if I did, but I just know that it is just going to draw out the process even longer than it already is.
Yeah. I
So
don't know
I'm
that
just
it
going to stick
would
with the
even
pantsing.
make it easier. Like, and I think maybe it's also because I'm a pantser that I think about plotting as this, like, how do you do that? But really, it's just doing the same thing because we're all just making stuff up at the end of the
Yeah,
day.
that's true. At the end of the day, we are just making stuff up.
Like, once I get to like too far removed, like you said, too much of a bird's eye view, I can't see it anymore. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. How would I know? I haven't been
Yeah,
there.
and I just feel like when I have tried to write off of a plot, I find myself like I write in first person and I'll find the character trying to like justify their decisions a lot and like explaining what they're doing. And I'm like, this doesn't feel natural. Like if I'm having to explain it to the reader and explain it to myself, like something is not fully working there. And I don't find
Right.
that I encounter those issues quite as often when I'm pantsing. I feel like also just consuming a lot of media helps because if you have just kind of that intrinsic understanding of how storytelling works and what the beats are that you need to hit, like that's enough to write a draft with. And then you use like
Mhm.
a more rigid structure when you're going back and editing. Like when I know what my midpoints are, so then I have to go back and make sure that it's at the 50% mark. And that
Right.
just works better for me.
What does your revision process look like then once you have your draft?
Well, it's been extremely chaotic, much like everything else in my writing process. Uh, I feel like I have a series of epiphanies when it comes to editing the book. Like it starts with feedback. I'll have like three or four beta readers read, like a very lightly edited first draft. And then their feedback will give me some story related epiphanies. But the thing that I've really struggled with is like fine tuning the line level writing and getting that where it needs to be. So even though it only took me, I think, 3 months to write my draft, I've been editing my book for over a year now. And very few of those edits, there were some developmental edits, but nothing gigantic. The biggest piece has just been like how to make the sentences sound good. So
Hmm.
after I had my initial beta readers, I did more editing. It still just wasn't feeling right. And so I started using paid beta readers. Like I needed somebody that was going to be like truly removed from me. We've never met before. I'm basically paying them to do a service like an editor. And I
Hmm.
got a lot of really good, honest feedback doing that. And a lot of them were like marking up things in the text and kind of like showing me what wasn't working. I'm a person that
That's
learns by
helpful.
example. So like I can't read another book and be like, this is how you write a sentence. I need to see it in my own writing and being like, this is what's working and what's not. So I've been through a few of those now with the beta readers and now with an agent. And now I'm hoping that I'm finally rolling to a stop, and I'll be done editing this month after a year of editing
Amazing.
nonstop.
Well, that's very exciting. How did you
Yeah,
find your
it's
first
been.
beta readers?
I found my early beta readers on TikTok, which um that's where I post the majority of my writing content. I just really like the writing community there. So I opened like a formal application. I had my Google sheet. I had like 25 people sign up to read it, and it was like the most exciting day of my life that 25 people wanted to read my my
That's
crappy
awesome.
draft. I waited for like a month with bated breath, waiting for them to get back to me. I think I had one person. Yeah, I had my coworker, the one that inspired me to write in the first place. I had her actually be one of my beta readers. She was the only one that knew me. And because of that, she also provided the least feedback because I think she was scared to hurt my feelings.
Right?
Yeah. But I think if I could go back in time and do it all over again, I probably would have done more editing before having beta readers because you only get one like pure read from somebody where they have like their expectations or, kind of level set. And I wish that I hadn't wasted those on such a rough draft. Like I did edit it, but I'm newer to writing, so I didn't realize quite how rough it was until now.
Right.
I look back at it sometimes and I'm like, oh, yikes.
But it's all learning.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm working on my second book in tandem with editing this first one. And I'm really hoping that now that I have learned such a tremendous amount of information about craft and storytelling over the course of this past year, that I'm only going to need 6 months to edit the next one and then maybe 3 months after that. See how it goes.
Right. You mentioned that you had a different editing like process with your agent. How did you get your agent?
I traveled like crazy when I was querying to like every writing conference that I could make work with my schedule and my budget, just because I feel like it's easier to break through the noise if you have the ability to do that. It's like easier to have a face-to-face conversation with someone and pitch to them rather than like sitting in the slush pile for a month or 10. So I was
Mhm.
doing regular querying, and then I was also traveling around. I went to, I think, 10 writing conferences in the time that I was querying. Like, I went really hard with it. But the agent that I ended up finding, she ended up being actually like literally the last agent I ever queried. And I was at the Washington Writers Conference last year. I wanted like an in-person pitch to be my big finale. And at that point, I had given up hope of even getting an agent, but I'd already got tickets to the conference. So I was like, whatever, may as well.
Yeah.
Um, and then, yeah, she ended up being my agent. It was kind of a unique story because I thought I was going to self-publish my book. And that agent, after I met her at the conference, I'd like sent her my partial manuscript. And she requested a full day after I decided that I was going to self-publish. So I never responded. And I posted on all my social media. I was like, I'm self-publishing my book now. And then I guess they must have been looking into me on Twitter or something because she emailed me and she sent me this really heartfelt email. She was like, I loved your partial manuscript. I loved your pitch at the conference. I know you said you're going to self publish, but if there's any chance that you would still consider going the traditional way, I'd love to read the rest of your manuscript. And that experience of being chased after by an agent is super rare. And at that
Yeah.
point, I didn't think I had anything to lose. So I was like, whatever, I'll send it. Worst case scenario, I'll get some feedback that I can use to make it better before I self publish it. And then I ended up getting an offer like 2 or 3 weeks later. So that really shifted my plans in a major way, like turned everything
Yeah.
upside down.
What made you decide to go with traditional publishing versus self-publishing?
I mean, I think I have a lot of the same dreams as a lot of people, which is to like see my book on a bookshelf. And you can definitely do those types of things with indie publishing, but you just can't beat the resources of a traditional publisher. And just being like, just some radical candor here. I love institutional validation. I could eat it for breakfast if I could. Um,
Finally, somebody said it.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm just going to be for real.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the end of the day, the most important thing to me is that somebody reads my book someday. So if traditional publishing doesn't work out, I've already done like half the work for self-publishing. I'll just go back and do it. I want to give it a shot because it's an opportunity that a lot of authors dream about, and it felt wrong to turn it down. Um, and I'm excited about, like at least being able to say that I tried. I tried in the traditional publishing world, and I'm open to whatever happens next. If they want to throw a 6-figure book advance and wild success my way, like I'm not going to say no. But if I self-publish it and 25 people end up reading it, I'll be happy with that too.
Yeah. And you're editing it right now, the final edit, and then you're gonna send it to your agent, and then you're gonna go on sub.
Yeah, the way that the agency works is that they basically like have a manuscript schedule for their clients. So you can basically sign up for whenever their earliest time slot is, and then that's kind of like your soft deadline to return your manuscript. So my soft deadline is the second week of January, so it's approaching very fast. But I feel really lucky that I have an editorial agent because she's read my manuscript twice already and left me really great, thoughtful feedback both times. And I know she's really busy, so it's nice to feel like I have a partner that also understands that you only get one shot with editors when you're out on sub. So like you have to make the best first impression that you possibly can. And even like the first round of revisions that I did with her, looking back at that manuscript now as I'm editing it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is still pretty rough. Like there's still some little I's that need to be dotted and T's that need to be crossed. So I'm really grateful to her that she, like at first I was like low key kind of devastated when she sent it back to me and said we needed to do another round of editing, but now I'm really thrilled because I feel like it's a lot better than it was even a couple months ago.
That's awesome. Are you excited to go on sub?
I'm nervous about it. I have been lurking in like the on submission groups on like Facebook and Twitter and stuff. And you hear some pretty harrowing stories out there about like your book just going into the ether for a year and never hearing anything about it. So I'm nervous, mostly just because like querying was so hard. Not necessarily even the rejection, just like the waiting.
Yeah.
But I know that that's just kind of something that you have to do in traditional publishing. So I'm hoping it'll be like a good learning experience for how to just like sit in the discomfort in the moment and just work through it. I am like halfway through the first draft of my second book that I'm working on. So I'm hoping that that will keep me sufficiently busy. And I'm also hoping that I'll finish it in time so that, by the time my book would like officially be declared dead, if it was, that I could just jump back in with another one. And that's what I plan to do until I get published, basically. That's my publication plan.
Good plan.
The question is, can I come up with that many ideas?
You can. They're all over the place.
I was kind of worried I wouldn't be able to come up with a second one, but now I'm really digging the second story that I'm working on. So yeah, who knows? There's probably some other ones buried in there.
Where did you find inspiration for the first one?
I actually wrote the book kind of as a way to process a relationship that had ended. And it started out as a very literal writing of the things that happened in this relationship. And then as I realized that, like, you can't write out 6 years worth of events and make them interesting in, like, in a format like that, I started kind of, like, condensing my emotions and things into themes that then became, like more representative of the events that actually happened rather than a literal word for word thing. And then it just kind of spiraled from there. Like the story is really intricate and sprawling, and I look back at it and I'm like, I don't know how how this came out of my brain. But that's kind of the beauty of pantsing, is that it's like, you're unveiling the angel in the marble, or I don't remember who said that, but I really do feel that way. Like you're carving a story out of nothing, but like it's always existed.
Mm-hmm. Where did you get your inspiration for the one you're working on now?
This one, well, I was actually that was why I was worried I didn't have a second story in me was because I was like, that one was very personal. And now I've dumped like all of my baggage into this book. I don't have anything thing left for a second one.
There's trauma
Um,
everywhere. What are you talking about? Mommy, you have more trauma?
yeah. It's true. I couldn't think of a way to like wrap it up quite as, package it quite as nicely a second time
Right.
though. So this time around, I was literally just thinking, because like for my first story, just by pure chance, I thought of an amazing plot twist. Like I love the plot twist in my book. I think it's really unique. And I'm like, I kind of want that to be my thing. I want to be like the thriller author that writes the really unexpected plot twists. But then I was like, that one came to me by pure chance after I'd already started writing. This time around, I was purely thinking, like, what could be an incredible plot twist? Because, like, I need to keep up the momentum of just having, like, that earth shattering midpoint beat drop that I had in the first one. So I was literally just, like, cycling through ideas. I was, like, watching a ton of thrillers. I was reading a ton. And then finally, one day I was, like, in the shower or something, and it just kind of came to me. So yeah, I don't have like as personal of a story for this one, but I was specifically writing around like a plot twist this time.
That's exciting.
Hopefully it's as cool as I think it is. Otherwise,
I
it's gonna be really embarrassing.
bet it is. I'm so intrigued on what the plot twist in the first one is. Because I found you because I watched your TikToks and they're amazing. And you like when you said you work in marketing, I was like, yeah, you do. Because your videos are so good. And I'm like, what is the plot twist?
Okay, fun fact about my history with social media really quick. I actually used to be a plus size fashion influencer. That was my
Oh,
niche
fun.
on TikTok during the pandemic. I had a huge account, 350,000 followers. I know it's like not that big, but for me, it was big.
That's huge.
And I got in a public controversy with a brand.
Oh,
Um, so I deleted that TikTok account, not knowing that one day I was going to want to write a book. Now I look back at it, I'm like, wow, I really could have used those
Did a
350,000
pivot.
followers. Yeah, my following is much more
That's
modest now. But
it's
I've
still
heard
pretty
that before.
good.
A lot of people said they followed me because they wanted to know what the twist was in my book.
Yeah, I like have only read the first chapter because you've put it out a few different places, and so I know like basically what it's about, and I have so many theories about the plot twist already, and I've only read the first chapter, which is crazy.
Oh
So
my
none
God.
of my
Okay.
theories can be right. Um, but I'm really excited to read it because I want to see if maybe like by some odd chance that my theory is right, and then I would feel really good about myself.
Oh, I'm dying to know what your theories are. But like even the first chapter, I feel like is so different from what I've put out in the past. Like I'm hoping that when you eventually read it, you won't even recognize it, other than maybe
Yeah.
like the character names. But hopefully it'll be a completely different experience.
Is it hard to learn and write and edit and feedback so much? It seems like you've like learned a lot in 1 year. Has that been a
Yeah.
challenging experience?
Yeah, that's pretty much like my how I do things is like when I decide to commit to something, I'm in it 100% of the way immediately. That's kind of how I was with burlesque too. I did burlesque for 5 years and I immediately was like, I'm gonna tour the festival circuit, I'm gonna travel around North America, I'm gonna perform at shows all over, I'm gonna buy these expensive costumes. Like a lot of people treat it with a lot more relaxed than I did. They perform at a local show once a month and it's like fun and good. But I'm like, no, I need awards. I need to compete. I need to know everything there is to know. I need to rehearse 5 hours a day. So I very much kind of taken up that same mentality with writing. I do work from home. I have like a remote tech job. It's very convenient. It gives me like a lot of time, extra time that I feel like a lot of people lose, like in their commute or obviously working in
Mhm.
a physical office. And literally every free minute that I'm not in meetings or actively working, I'm working on my book or I'm reading or I'm beta reading for somebody else, just like trying to consume media in some sort of critical way or typing. And so I think I'm really glad I didn't track how many hours I spent working on this book because I think the number would probably make me cry. But on average, I spend 4 hours a day on some sort of craft work every single day, like without fail. So over the course of a year, that adds up to a lot of time. And like that's
Yeah.
an average, maybe a minimum. Yeah.
Are you tired?
Oh, I'm
Okay, good.
exhausted.
I am too.
Like every once in a
What?
while, I'll have a day where like I just completely burn out and I just have to like lay in bed with the lights off. My boyfriend calls it my rotting time. But then the next day I feel amazing and then I get back at it. And then I work myself to the bone and the cycle kind of repeats itself until the end of time.
There you go. Do you normally write, like, do you have a routine then, or is it just like all the time whenever you can?
Yeah. I mean, my whole process, like from soup to nuts, is just very chaotic. So it's like sometimes I can't sleep and I'll wake up at 4 in the morning and then I'll be writing until my meetings start at 11. Some days I'll have a super crazy day at work and I won't be able to touch it until, like 6 or 7 at night. And then I'll work until midnight. It's mostly just whenever I can fit it in, I do. The hardest
Mhm.
part is in the drafting stage because I feel like you need a lot more intrinsic motivation to sit down and write a draft. Whereas, like, when you're editing, and the framework is in place, it's a lot easier. So I'm definitely more consistent with the editing. But the drafting, sometimes I'll just stare at my computer for like an hour and not do anything.
That's what I do for revising. I'm so much more intimidated to revise than I am to draft. I don't
So
know why.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's so interesting that you're the opposite. But I guess it makes sense because you have stuff to work with.
Yeah. Sometimes when I'm like really in the flow, I can do a ton in one day, but it's never like with editing, I feel so consistent. I sit down, I know how many chapters I need to edit a day. I know I will edit those chapters. With drafting, I know how much word count I want to write in a day, but it usually goes where like one day I'll write 5,000 words and then the next day I'll come back and I'll delete half of them and then not write anything else and then the next day I'll write 500 words and it's just like it's less consistent for sure.
Right. That makes sense. 5,000 words is a lot.
Yeah. Those days are few and far between and most of what I write on those days I end up like hating the next day, but they do happen every once in a while.
And you don't like delete, right? You have like a cut folder.
Yeah. I have
Okay,
a I
good.
have an extensive graveyard. Like for this book that I'm writing now, my graveyard is 50 pages long. Like it's a lot, and I'm only halfway through the book.
Yeah. I
So the
have a
scraps alone will probably be like a full length novel by the end.
maybe it'll be another book.
Probably not. um, but yeah, I have a really bad habit also of rereading what I wrote because because I'm a pantser, I have to write in chronological order. Like I don't know where the story is going. And also since I haven't plotted it, I kind of lose where I am sometimes. So out of necessity, I have to go back and like reread a couple chapters at least. And I know your first draft is supposed to be bad, but like when my first draft is bad, it makes me really anxious. So I am guilty definitely of editing as I go to some extent, but I'm trying to get better about it. I feel like that's just something that we all have to battle in our own way.
Yeah. If I ever go back and reread, I usually end up like fixing things if I see them, but I usually don't let myself go back.
Yeah, see, like when I know that something needs to be fixed, like a specific thing, like sometimes I'll have more esoteric notes, like I didn't feel like this one thing is working, I'll come back and figure it out later. But if I know something specific is going to change, like an interaction between a character, like a piece of dialogue or something, it will just live inside my head like a worm until I just like fix it.
Yeah, it's
Because
like a
even
real
if I
quick.
write it down, I'm so terrified that I'll forget or I won't remember, like why I wanted to change it later on. As you
Right.
can tell, I'm like not a very patient person, which is going to make publishing super fun for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why I've been working so fast is just because like I'm not patient and I want to be good at writing and I want my book to be good like now. So this has actually been like just a very interesting exercise for me as a person because it's made me realize that you can put your 100% into something, but there's just no substitute for the time that it takes to absorb information and then put it into practice. You can't just lock yourself in a room and read craft books and then come out and then magically be an amazing writer. It just does, there's no substitute for time and experience, which is
Yeah.
hard for me to accept, but it was a good lesson to learn.
Yeah. There's like, I've been trying to find this word all over the internet because I went to art school and there was this term that this like set of artists used, and I don't remember what it was called. It drives me insane, but it's like the time spent working on a piece. It's this like ephemeral thing that becomes part of the art, and you can't like pinpoint what it is, and you can't like change it, and you can't, but you can see it, and like it's kind of like the aura of the art piece. It's like in there, and I kind of like to think of my books sometimes like that, especially when I feel like one is taking longer than I would like it to. I'm like, but it's going to add to this like aura of the piece, right? But
I like that. I've never heard that before, but I like that. And I definitely agree.
I think they just take time. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Which is like the last thing that I want to hear. And I'm glad that when I started writing, I had that naive attitude where I was like, I'm just going to churn this book out and it's going to be amazing on my first try. Because if I didn't have that confidence, I might have been too afraid to start. But yeah, I definitely agree with you.
Yeah. I think if anybody knew how much work goes into like one actual book, nobody would write one. I really don't.
I'm really jealous of people that can romanticize their writing process because for me, like, there's no routine, there's no cute vibes. Like, I'm not pouring myself a mug of tea and lighting a candle. I'm literally like rolling out of bed, throwing on pants, and just, like slamming my fingers into the keyboard and hoping something good comes out like as fast as I can before my workday starts. But like all the love and respect in the world to people that could do that. I wish that could be me. It's just
I
not.
know. I want it so bad. I want the candle and the ritual. Like I do have a ritual where I usually do it at the same time every day, and I have coffee because it's in the morning. But like, it's definitely not aesthetic. It's like at my kitchen table, that my like have to focus on the laptop because everything over here is a mess, and I probably should be cleaning it, but I'm not going to. I would love that romanticized, beautiful
Yeah.
candle.
And
And
I write in the same area where I work. I have my work from home setup with my dual monitors and everything. So I'm literally sitting in the same spot for like 10 or 12 hours a day. And I have to remind myself to be like, go take a walk, go drink some water. But it's really not anything special at all. Like to look at, it's not cozy or anything. It's just a
yeah,
table in my living room, basically. So I don't even have a Pinterest board for my book, which I feel like is really,
I am
that's
guilty of
really
that.
bad, right?
I love to waste time with Pinterest boards. And I do feel like to a certain extent is a little bit of wasting time. And I usually do it when I'm like on a scene that I'm a little bit stuck on and I should be working on or trying to work through, but instead like, I'm gonna make this really pretty board. And it's gonna be
Yeah, I know
aesthetically
people that like
pleasing.
they cannot write until they have their Pinterest board and their playlist made for like to capture the vibe of the book. And I'm like, that sounds really cool. I can't even do that after my book is done. I still can't sum up the vibe in like a cute little photo collage or a succinct playlist. So I guess that's just like a piece of the aesthetic that I'm missing, but I'll trade it if it if it ends up working out.
There you go. You write in the same space where you work. Does that ever mess with your head?
I thought it would more. 'Cause like back during COVID, I used to live in a smaller apartment and I worked in my bedroom and like I couldn't sleep at night because it was the same place where I worked and like I couldn't shift my brain on and off. But I think it actually helps being at my workspace that I use for my job just because I know that when I sit down and I'm behind the desk, that's like my productive time. Like I'm just used to getting stuff done when I'm sitting there. So it actually ends up working in my favor. I feel like if I try to go to a coffee shop or sometimes I write at the library with my writing group, like I feel like I just get more distracted in places like that. Occasionally I'll get stuck and I'll take my book or I'll take my laptop to a different room. But I do the vast majority of my work in that same spot and it seems to work for me. So
Yeah.
yeah.
How did you find your writing group?
I have two writing groups. One of them is like a big pre-established like critique group that has been in Dallas for like 50 years or something, which is kind of crazy. Like it's
That is
so crazy all the writing subculture that has just existed all around you that you become attuned to when you start writing. And they're really hardcore. They meet once a week, every single week, holidays, like it doesn't matter. They're always there. So I stop by that group occasionally. They are like 100% dedicated to just you read aloud and you get critique. And then I have a smaller group that I actually found on TikTok. There's four of us. We're all women. There's like a mixture of genres that we write, and we meet up every other week at the library. And it's just a really chill vibe. We alternate between giving each other critique or just having free writing sessions. Um, and I really like it a lot.
Do you all
It's
write
really
the
up the
same
game
genre?
for my writing, and I found my like new forever critique partner there. So yeah, social media bringing us together.
Yay! Do you all write the same genre?
It's like half fantasy, half thriller, which is cool. I love working with like fantasy and romance authors because I'm so envious of people that can do like rich, elaborate world building, and I feel like their eye is so helpful, like from a critical perspective, even though we don't write in the same genre. But then it's nice to also have somebody that like can kind of gut check me on the more like genre specific stuff. So it just feels like the perfect group that we were like meant to come together and be writing buddies. I don't know if that sounds too cheesy.
No, I don't think so at all. Do you read thrillers or do you read across genres? Like what drew you to writing thrillers to begin with?
I do like thrillers. I would say like my main form of media that I've consumed a lot is I love film. Like I travel around to film festivals. I love watching genre film and foreign stuff. And so that's where I feel like I picked up kind of my love for storytelling. I've also always loved to read, but I read more like historical fiction and things that I could never write because I'm too lazy to research. Um, so my love of like thrillers and film kind of drew me to the literary thriller genre, and I found myself like having a real love-hate relationship with the books that I was reading because I felt like I could guess the plot twists, which is like it's actually like now as an author, I feel like it's actually a good thing when people can guess plot twists because it means that the plot twist makes sense. But as a reader, it frustrated me. I'm like, man, I would really love to be surprised. And then also I just kind of also feel like there's a lot of misogyny in that genre, particularly when it comes to like writing women with mental illness and using that as a vehicle to like make a story go off the rails. And I was like, wouldn't it be cool if there was one book that just kind of had the best of all these different things that I love from these different books, all the bits and pieces just together? I feel like that's what brings a lot of us to writing. So yeah, it was just like that for me specifically with thrillers. Also, I feel like maybe my brain is just only wired for thrillers. Like, I can't think of a single good idea in another genre, but for like plot twists and stuff, that's where I feel inspired.
Mhm. What are some of the films that inspired you to write then? Do you have some favorite?
I really love the Korean film called The Handmaiden. It's a sapphic film with one of the best like thriller plot twists I've ever seen.
I haven't seen that one, so I'll put it on my list.
It's really good. It is long, but it's 100% worth a watch.
Okay, good. Thanks for the heads up on the long. What are some of your favorite thriller books then?
My favorite like new thriller author on the scene, I'll read anything that she writes, is Stacey Willingham. I really love her prose. She just has like such a flowery literary prose that is like really nice to see in a commercial thriller. It's like a great blending for me. I also really like Andrea Bartz for similar reasons. Like she has similes and metaphors in her books that just really like paint a picture and make it come to life. And I also tend to feel like she writes through like the feminist lens that I really enjoy. As far as like specific books, my favorite book of all time is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I know it's like more of like a gothic mystery than an actual thriller, but I hope that people who read my book one day will kind of like see little glimmers of how I was inspired by that story. I love any kind of story that has to do with complicated relationships because I feel like I can't relate to somebody being murdered or kidnapped or anything, but love is so scary and emotions can make you so vulnerable and make people do crazy things. So I tend to gravitate towards books about those types of things.
Mm-hmm. I've never actually read that one, which
It's an oldie but a goodie. Like, I definitely recommend it.
I recently read one that was kind of like a almost like a retelling.
I would love to do a
What?
retelling, but I feel like they've already been done to death. My
Yeah.
dream is to one day write a thriller that is a retelling of the story of like the Six Wives of Henry VIII, but like maybe just the first two, because I'm obsessed with that particular like time in history. And I would love to like translate that to a modern thriller, but I haven't thought of
Oh,
a good way to do it yet. So I'm just locking that one away and hoping after, like not thinking about it for years, it'll just somehow magically come out fully cooked someday.
isn't that always the dream? It
Yeah.
could happen.
Haven't been completely disillusioned. I still have hopes and dreams that are silly like that.
Oh. Do you have a favorite book on the craft of writing?
I really like the 5 sentence method by Rebecca Thorne. I feel like it is like the best um craft book that I've seen that can kind of apply equally whether you're a pantser or a plotter. Um and I think like writing a 5 sentence summary of my story is like as much of a plotting commitment as I can make. But reading through it, that particular book was really helpful. And I have tried to do it once I fleshed out my ideas a little bit more, and I do find it to be like a helpful guidepost. So that's the book that I recommend the most for sure if you're a pantser.
How else did you learn? Were you taking classes at the conferences too? Were there classes that you really liked that you learned a lot from?
Yeah, there was good curriculum at a lot of the conferences that I went to. There was a lot of talks from both agents and authors, so I found both perspectives to be really interesting and helpful while I was still, getting started with my book. The one that sticks out in my head is I wish I could remember her name, but at this one writers conference, someone had developed a spreadsheet for how to synthesize like qualitative feedback from your beta readers and turn it
Whoa.
into like a score, like a mathematical score.
That's
Um,
amazing.
it was an amazing, fascinating session. I think I still have the spreadsheet that she created somewhere in my documents, so I can try to find it and send her name over to you. But there are some really creative ways that people have like elevated their craft that I've learned about that I found really interesting. But for me, like again, I can listen to a lot of information and absorb it without really internalizing it. It doesn't ever really sink into me unless I have like my hands on the keyboard and I'm actually like doing it myself. Kind of like
Mm-hmm.
learning a new software, like watching a demo doesn't do anything for me. I have to like be in there clicking the buttons and figuring out what everything does. And I definitely feel like I've had a similar experience with writing for sure.
Mm-hmm. How do you incorporate feedback when you get it into your work?
Um, I think learning how to synthesize feedback is actually a really important skill that people don't talk enough about. Because when you're new, it can be really overwhelming, particularly when you have your first set of beta reader feedback. It's also really easy to get your feelings hurt because you're like, oh, look at all the things that I need to change. But in truth, I think I only end up utilizing like 50 to 60% of the feedback that I get. The majority I usually agree with, but I think sometimes we just have to like not be afraid to put our foot down and protect your artistic vision, even though it may come at the cost of some readers not agreeing with you. But like at the end of the day, even the best books in the world have 1-star reviews on Goodreads, and nobody's gonna love it anyway. So I may as well just like try to paint the best picture that I can for the people that will.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I definitely tend to tackle the developmental edits like kind of fast and furious. Like if somebody points out a tangible issue to me that I can like conceptualize right away, I'll dive into it. Then there are things that they'll say that like something's not working and you can't think about why, and you got to ponder over those for a little bit, and go for a walk and take a long shower and until it clicks.
Mm-hmm.
But fortunately, I haven't had a ton of feedback like that. It's mostly been tangible stuff. Like I think in one of my first drafts, I had like a nursery was on the top floor and the bedroom was on the bottom floor, and somebody called out. They were like, a nursery would be much closer to the master bedroom because that's where the parents would be. And I'm like, oh, I'm an idiot. That's so obvious. But you don't think about that when you're like in the throes of typing, especially when you're a pantser. So it's been really interesting. I used to dread
Mm-hmm.
feedback a lot, but now I find it very inspiring. And it's been like the real source of those epiphanies that I've had on how to make things better, and particularly how to make them read better. Because people will just throw things at you that you've never thought about once in your life before.
Mm-hmm. So true.
Yeah.
It's always tricky to know when it's like bigger developmental things from beta readers. It's so hard to know like what feedback to take and what not to.
Yeah. I mean, fortunately, and I feel like this is probably not exclusive to pantsers, but because I spend all that time writing kind of before the story even kicks off, like I probably have to write those first 20,000 words 10 times before they stick and I keep going. I feel like I'm so deep in my characters' heads at that point that I feel like I really understand their motivations to the point where if something doesn't feel authentic to me, then I can easily shoot it down and be like, no, this character wouldn't do this or they wouldn't say this. In a way that like I feel much more authoritative and more comfortable being able to like reject some of the ideas that I get in the feedback stage, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing your journey with us. I'm so excited to read the book.
Yeah, thank you again for having me. I hope the
Yeah,
plot
it's
twist
really
lives up to your expectations.
like well, it's going to. I'll let you know. Is there anything else that you want to share?
No, I feel like I just word vomited at you for like an hour. It's
No, no,
all out
no.
there.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation. I really loved what Hannah had to say about how being a plotter or a pantser is like intrinsic. And you can like work with your nature or work against it as a pantser. I found that very validating. And also just something to think about how you could best work with what you're naturally inclined to do. So are you a plotter or a pantser? It's the question of the day. Put your answer in the comments or reach out and let me know. I'm kind of a hybrid, but if I'm true to my nature, I'm a pantser. Thanks. See you next time.